Good morning. My name is Sarah Johnson from SCSP, and I'm honored to introduce the next fireside chat with General Eric Smith. General Smith is the Assistant Commandant of the United States Marine Corps. He has a distinguished career commanding at every level, in peacetime and in combat. As a general officer, General Smith also served as the Senior Military Assistant to both the Deputy Secretary of Defense and the Secretary of Defense. On stage to moderate this discussion, we will be joined by the Honorable Robert O. Work, the 32nd U.S. Deputy Secretary of Defense and a member of our SCSP Board of Advisors. General Smith and Secretary Work, take it away.
Well, good morning, everybody. It's great to be here. Flash back to the Department of Defense when I spent a lot of my time waiting for Frank to stop talking. But today we're going to be talking about a microcosm of what this whole day is about. And it's about Force Design 2030, which in my mind is the most far-reaching transformation of a service since the end of the Cold War especially, and possibly since the birth of the Republic. It's just truly an amazing event. Now, the story starts in Operation Desert Storm back in 1990, which saw a new way of war ushered in. And the character of war started changing. Actually, the character of war started changing before Desert Storm, and it certainly accelerated after. There's a lot of aspects of it, but generally, you can conceive of it as battlefields that are almost fully but not completely transparent, and are swept by guided munitions, which have zero miss accuracy. So all of the services have been struggling. What do we do in this new type of warfare? And without question, the United States Marine Corps has led the thinking behind what it means, and Commandant David Berger has taken just extraordinary steps to transform the Marine Corps. Now, you all know that the Marine Corps, there's no service that's prouder than the Marine Corps of its martial prowess. And for General Berger to tell his Marines, look, we aren't good enough for the future. We've got to change, so we will be good enough. And he started this off with Force Design 2030. Now, there's nobody better to talk about this than the Assistant Commandant of the Marine Corps, who was central to thinking about Force Design 2030 when he was in Quantico at the Combat Development and Integration. Is it a directorate?
Deputy Commandant, Combat Development and Integration, sir.
And so he helped General Berger think about what these changes would mean, and has been right alongside General Berger as Force Design 2030 has unfolded. Eric and I go back a long way. He was Secretary Carter's senior military assistant. He was the Deputy Secretary of Defense. Then Ash left, and Christine Fox became the acting Deputy Secretary of Defense, and he remained as the senior military assistant for her. And then she left, and I came in, and he stayed with me. We just couldn't find anybody who wanted him, so we just said, okay, we'll keep him.
True.
Then he leaves, and it was like taking my right arm off. And he is literally down in Florida fishing. I'm sorry, he corrected me. He says, I wasn't fishing, I was catching. And he received a call on Veterans Day, and it was, come back up here, you got to be here tomorrow. And Secretary Carter brought him back to be his senior military assistant. Now, Eric was told, this is a temporary gig. But as soon as he walked in the office, he says, okay, I'll help you get through this temporary thing. And Ash looked at him and said, temporary? This is permanent. So he was back in the fold. And then he came back, and man, talk about an officer of integrity, moral courage, an unbelievable gentleman. He is the best of the best. So Eric, the first thing I'd like to ask you is, people have probably heard of Force Design 2030, but if you could give a small kind of, this is what it was all about, or this is what it is all about, so that we can dive deeper for the audience.
Well, thanks, Mr. Secretary. Like all good generals, the first thing I'm going to do is not answer your question. And I'm going to take just 30 seconds, if you will, to say thank you for letting me be here. It really is a privilege to be at anything that has Dr. Carter's name on it. I learned a tremendous amount from Dr. Carter. Pardon me. A tremendous amount. And he was a truly good person, and he cared deeply about those who worked for him, which is pretty much everybody in this room, who all experienced that. What I'd also like to say is he could work. He could work. And so when you were on a trip, you worked. There was no downtime. It's also a privilege to be graced by Stephanie Carter's presence today, because one of the first things we always asked when we were taking off on a trip, is Steph going? Because if Steph came, he still worked a lot, but he just worked at a slightly less superhuman level than before. So Steph was always a point of grace on the trips. So thanks for letting me be here, Steph. It's really good to see you. Ms. Secretary, what I would say for those that aren't familiar with force design, first, there's two things. There's force development. That is a normal process by which we go through and acquire things and budget for things. And then there's force design, which is once in a generational change. The Marine Corps simply took the 2018 and then 2022 National Defense Strategies, which declared China as the pacing challenge, and then Russia as an acute threat, still dealing with Iran, North Korea, and violent extremism, and said, we made an honest assessment. Our previous two commandants made an assessment that we were not organized, trained, or equipped to deal with that threat best. And as a father of a U.S. Marine, I can tell you what I want my son to be is overmatched against the next war that he goes to. So he said, let's get ourselves best positioned, best organized, trained, equipped. So we set about Force Design 2030, which has elements of equipment, organization, and training, and then personnel management. Those changes enable a force that already is dedicated to the Indo-Pacific. Everybody understands the Unified Campaign Plan, the UCP. It aligns forces and assigns forces to the Indo-PACOM commander. Those forces that are already assigned to Indo-PACOM had to be task organized. Marines are famous for task organization. Task organized for the challenge that they face, which is living inside the enemy's weapons engagement zone and enabling the joint force, sensing, making sense, doing reconnaissance, counter-reconnaissance, and then striking when required to add to a credible conventional deterrence. And so that's what we set about doing, sir. It is, we're 172,500 right now. When I came into the Marine Corps, we were about 172,500. We've gone up to 202,000 and back down. This is the history of the Marine Corps. So we are simply preparing before the war starts. And we're preparing for the next war, not trying to do what has so often happened in military history, is preparing for the last war. That's what force design is. It's innovative. It'll shake some people up. But again, it is required to fight the next war. As Secretary Kendall just noted, the threat is China. The existential threat is China.
Thanks, Eric. You know, a lot of these times, these broad transformations occur after a war. And although we are not in a war,
hey, thanks, Illy.
We are watching a war in Ukraine. And so I'd like to start there and ask you to take a retrospective rather than a perspective look. And as if you look at the first 15 months of the Ukrainian war, is it allowing the Commandant and you to do some Kentucky windage on Force Design 2030? Is there anything that you've seen that said, man, we don't think that's right? Or are there things that you are seeing that say, hey, we're feeling pretty confident that this isn't proof, but it does give us reason to believe we're on the right track?
Mr. Secretary, I would say two things. First, we're using this as an additive. We had as force design went through, we went through the virtuous cycle of concept development, wargaming, experimentation, refinement, concept refinement, wargaming, experimentation, refinement. That's been going on for some 3 years. I think we've conducted 19 significant war games, about 35 experiments, give or take, and getting input and feedback from the fleet Marines on the ground. We add to that what we see in Ukraine in Ukraine in the first 15 months. And I would say it's too soon to say that the war in Ukraine validates anything, but it certainly gives you a pathway and a trajectory. Massed formations are at risk. Disaggregated formations, which are interconnected, have outsized negative impacts against an adversary. As you said, a ubiquitous intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance network that provides a transparency to the battlefield is just a fact of life. Signature management matters. Long-range fires matter. But you have to be able to mass the effects of your fires at a time of your choosing without massing troops. The Russians have made that mistake repeatedly, and they paid the price repeatedly. I think the most important, so all that does tie to force design directly. The most important thing that I have personally learned is something that we knew all along and we've seen repeatedly. The fighting spirit of an individual soldier, in our case Marine, sailor, airman, matters most. The Ukrainians know exactly what they're fighting for their freedom, fighting for their survival. I don't think if you took a poll of any 100 Russian conscripts, you'd get a very high percentage that know what they're fighting for. So that is key. There has to be an understanding by the nation of what it is you're fighting for. Ukrainians do not have any misperception about what they're fighting for. That matters.
One of the things that's most noticeable about the Russian performance is their logistics is pretty poor. Surprisingly poor for a military power as big as Russia. And you mentioned that you're designing the force to operate inside the weapons engagement zone where the enemy can find you and target you with long-range guided munitions. That's going to make logistics even more hard than it already is. What is Ukraine telling the Marine Corps about how you need to change on the logistics front?
Well, a couple of things, sure. One, the Russians bit off far more than they could chew. They attempted a 5-pronged simultaneous attack with no logistics expertise whatsoever. I mean, they outkicked their coverage by far in terms of logistics. They did not anticipate an adversary for them, the good people for us, Ukraine, who would step up and fight. So that's thing one, is have a plan. I don't think they had one. What it's teaching us is that you have to pre-stage. We're very fortunate. We have, as Secretary Kendall just said, we have a lot of friends. We have a lot of friends in the region. I used to hear Dr. Carter say this all the time at the Shangri-La Dialogue. You know, the great thing about us, we have a lot of friends. China doesn't have as many friends, as you heard. About Secretary Kendall's gone, so I can say this. He stole that from Dr. Carter. The piece about, they went that, I'm sure a Chinese general said that too, but Dr. Carter said that at a Shangri-La Dialogue. So we've got the Philippines, we've got Thailand, we've got South Korea, we've got Japan, we've got Australia, we've got Singapore. I mean, we have a lot of friends out there. So you have to pre-stage your non-lethal means forward, because non-lethal things are good. You have to have a robust amphibious fleet. You have to be able to move heft and bulk at the time of your choosing. You have to invest in innovation, unmanned delivery systems, air, surface, and subsurface, so that the only thing you're moving in time of crisis is lethality. You use innovation to need less. You use expeditionary contracting. You use greens. Solar energy actually does work. We used it in Afghanistan. Those things will minimize your logistics burden. And for those who would question, well, you're going to be disaggregated throughout the first island chain in small, outsized importance groups, that's going to be really hard to logistically sustain. I would offer as the counter to that, if you think that's hard, try fighting your way into the weapons engagement zone. You never give up ground. The analogy I would use, sir, is if all you're trying to do is, if you're a homeowner and you're trying to keep somebody out of your house, they're already out, it's easy. You just pile more furniture against the door. That's the anti-access area denial threat. If somebody's already in your foyer, especially if they're a well-trained Marine, and you try to push them out your door, somebody's going to get hurt. And that is a different environment. That's why we're so focused on staying inside the weapons engagement zone, because as they often say, you don't pay for real estate twice. Easier to hold than to have to fight your way in. That is a significant reduction in the logistics burden that you'll place on the joint force.
One of the most far-reaching things I think of Force Design 2030 is the Commandant's decision to push combined arms capabilities all the way down to the squad level. I mean, I remember the discussions when we first went to the desert of pushing a lot of this down to the company level. And there was a lot of discussion. No, it needs to stay at battalion and division. The company will get overwhelmed with all the information. But it turned out that the company was able to handle all that information in a way. But now Commandant Berger wants to push it all the way down to the squad. How is that working out in experimentation?
Sure, I would say it's working very well in the experimentation. Not just because we're doing it, but because we're training to it. A short vignette here, sir. The infantry training used to be, when you finished boot camp, 12 weeks of Marine Corps Recruit Depot, Marine Corps boot camp, you went to the infantry, or School of Infantry. And those Marines who were going to be infantry, which is our backbone, that's who we are, they did an additional 8 weeks of training. But it was classroom instruction and field time. It was one instructor, 100 students. This is a machine gun. This is how we do it. We changed that. We made that training 14 weeks from 8 weeks. And what we did is we took the same squad, 13, 14 Marines. We took that squad and they stay together from day 1 to the end of day 70 of training. And one individual squad leader takes them from day 1 to day 70 and teaches them all aspects of infantry: fires, offense, defense, patrolling. So the squad leader gets better, and that group of Marines learns to think and operate as a team. Then they go to an infantry battalion together as a team. That is how we will fight, as a team. So the creativity, innovation of the team, there are Marines in there who can handle all of that data. Quote, overload for me. I still, probably like you, sir, no offense, I still got my kids' program on my phone. I can do it, I just don't want to. So they think that I'm old. I'm just smart enough to convince them to do it. But they're not watching right now because they're working. They better be. And then the Marine better be working anyway. He's a recruiter. The Marine squad can do all this. They have long range loitering drones. And so when we say we have prototypes, and people say, see, there you go. They only have prototypes. You actually have to pay for that. You actually have to procure it. The industrial base has to produce it en masse. So it does take time. So you have to assume some risk in the near term in order to get where you're going before the decade of uncertainty. Let's just say it's 27, 28. You have to take some risk now. But they'll have ranges out beyond 10, 20 kilometers. They'll have 30 minutes to an hour of loitering munitions that can strike targets. They've got communications gear that can literally go global. They've got anti-armor weapons that can destroy tanks at ranges far beyond what a tank can destroy a tank. So all these things a squad can absolutely handle, because that's how we're organized. So that is what we are as a service. We are the expeditionary combined arms team with global employment.
And one of the things that are most striking watching this unfold is, and surprising to me as a Marine myself, some of the pushback from some of the retired officers saying, hey, we're moving too fast, we're taking too much risk, humma. How is the Commandant coping with that and addressing it?
Well, I would say, sir, we won't ever get into tit for tats and all that kind of stuff. We take any criticism, evaluate it, assess it, but force design is based on the National Defense Strategy. It's based on the pacing threat. So it's threat-informed, fact-based. You got to have data. As Mr. Kendall knows, because it was on the outside of his office, and before him, Dr. Carter's office, when it was AT&L, Acquisitions, Technology, and Logistics. It said, and some of y'all may remember, Secretary Estevez, some others, Andrew, it said, "In God we trust. All others must bring data." And so you have to have data. You got to have facts. So everything we're doing is fact-based, and it's based on the lawful mission we've been given by the NDS and by our chain of command. So I don't, we want pushback. We read all the articles that come out, but I think the thing that people may forget is any good planner, and General Berger is a certified planner. Our MOS it's 05. He's a school-trained, School of Advanced Warfighting planner. You question your assumptions every day. You always check your own six, so to speak, but you set out every day trying to disprove your own assumptions. And that's what we do through our Marine Corps Warfighting Lab. We've had some exceptional officers down there. Christian Wortman, Major General Wortman now, Major General Watson now in command of 1st Marine Division, and now Brigadier General Ellison, who used to command the 3rd Marine Expeditionary Brigade out in Okinawa. We constantly question our own assumptions, revalidate, re-wicker, and we've made modifications thus far. As you know, so we added back some VMMs. We have added back some cannon batteries. We've changed the size of the infantry battalion down, then back up. We've changed where we place our sniping capabilities. So we're constantly under review and under modification.
How transferable is Force Design 2030 from the Indo-Pacific region? One of the complaints is the Commandant is, optimizing the Marine Corps for one particular adversary in one particular theater, sure, with one particular set of capabilities. What is it looking like in the other theaters? And will it be transferable, and will you be able to use these capabilities?
Sure, absolutely. I would refer you to Lieutenant General Frank Donovan, now the Vice Commander down at the Special Operations Command. He, as Commanding General of 2nd Marine Division, took Task Force 61.2 forward into the EUCOM theater to assist the European Command in support or in the countering of Russian aggression. That small, disaggregated force, using new technologies, was able to cooperate, operate, interact with our allies and partners, and at the unclassified level, track assets that were well beyond what anyone thought Marines could track. They were able to move and provide exquisite data to allies and partners using a combination of commercial and military-owned assets that far exceeded their size. I can tell you this, sir, that what we've done is the 3 regiments, the division, the MEF, that are, again, assigned to the Indo-Pacific, they're not leaving. They're task organized. That's where most of the change occurs. The 1st Marine Expeditionary Force, Camp Pendleton, California, 2nd Marine Expeditionary Force, Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, are largely as they were. The changes, the longer range munitions, the more ubiquitous communications and intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance assets are going to be applied to all of those units. So they will take the goodness that we learn in the Pacific, but it is absolutely exportable to all theaters. And I can just tell you this. I was a battalion commander in Iraq, in Ramadi. I was a regimental executive officer just outside of Fallujah. And I commanded a regiment in the northern part of Helmand province in Afghanistan. If I had had the capabilities, the things that, and the changes to our tactics, techniques, procedures that we are doing with force design, if I had had those in Iraq and Afghanistan, I'd have been more lethal. I'd have been better, and my units would have been more productive on the battlefield. That's a nice way of saying we'd have killed more people. We would have been more productive on the battlefield. So that was a Marine joke. I didn't go over on here, but that's how Marines talk. So,
this has been Force Design 2030 has been going on now for, as you said, about 3 years. Continues to roll. What are some of the next milestones that you're looking forward to now?
Sure. First, I would hit a couple things that have happened. We stood up the 3rd Marine Littoral Regiment in Hawaii. Its initial operating capability has been executed. They just did a service level training exercise at 29 Palms against the home team, 7th Marine Regiment, a traditional infantry regiment. First 2 or 3 days didn't go as well as we wanted it to. which is the whole virtuous cycle of experimentation. They reset, they went back out, and then they absolutely held their own against the home team, who knows every inch, as you know, sir. They know every inch of 29 Palms, our desert training base. Then they went forward, and they just executed the exercise Balikatan, the largest exercise we've done with the Philippines to date. The 12th Littoral Regiment has just been approved by the government of Japan in the most recent 2+2 agreements to stay on Okinawa. That is a significant nod to the value of the Littoral Regiment and the capabilities it brings. We've also established the medium-range intercept capability. After previous leadership divested of Hawk missiles, we had Stinger missiles, 5,000 meter max range kind of thing, pretty limited. We dealt with that for a couple of decades until we developed MRIC. So now we're pairing a Tamir missile with our TPS-80 Gator radar, ground-air task-oriented radar, to give us tens of kilometers of air defense range. We have established Nemesis, Navy Marine ship interdiction system, firing an anti-ship missile unclassified in excess of 100 miles, robotically from a joint light tactical vehicle. I mean, those are some things that we've already done, and that's just a few. MQ-9 Alpha extended range, we've done quite a few. So that's what's happened. What you'll see in the future is the 12th MLR stand up. You'll see our capabilities just begin to grow in capacity. You'll see more batteries of a Navy Marine ship interdiction system. They call it ROGUE vehicle, Remote Operational Ground Unit Expeditionary. We have an acronym for everything. And it's how you stay mentally sharp, is know all our acronyms. But we have that. You'll see those begin to grow in capacity, and you'll see loitering munitions get out there longer. And I would point out real quickly, sir, if I can, as a retired Marine colonel yourself and an artillery officer, the current batteries that we have, a normal howitzer is 17.5 kilometers, unless you use rocket-assisted projectiles. 17.5 kilometers, that's not going to get it done. They're also not that mobile because they're towed. For any boat or trailer owners here, you know that towing something behind a truck is never as ideal as you want it to be. The high mobility artillery rocket system has ranges in the tens and tens and tens of kilometers and is inherently mobile. A well-oiled, well-trained battery, after multiple months of preparation training, when they hit their peak, they can fire their last round and be on the move in about 7 minutes. That is wicked fast. I mean, that is wicked fast. You don't have 7 minutes when there's loitering munitions that have an AI algorithm that tells you, if you see this signature, kill it. A high mobility artillery rocket system, which is what you see so often in Ukraine, you shoot and you're gone in less than a minute. That's innovation. That's what you have to have on a modern battlefield. Those are the things that you'll see as we continue to grow capacity.
Now, you've mentioned several things that the new capabilities you're bringing in, but you had to give up some capabilities to pursue them. Yes. What were some of the hardest choices that the Commandant had to make?
I think all the choices are hard, sir. It's hard giving up tanks. I've operated with tanks, supported by Army tanks, frankly in Iraq, but tanks are hard to give up, but they're also hard to move. They're 70 tons. They have a huge logistics train. And if we're the fight tonight, kick in the door force, I can't be 4 blocks away while I'm dragging 70 tons with me. I got to kick in the door. We are a light, lethal, mobile naval expeditionary force. That's our Title 10 mission, as you know, sir. Title 10, Section 8063, provide combined arms teams for the service with the fleet and the seizure or defense of advanced naval bases. So tanks was tough. When we start reducing the number of tilt rotor squadrons, that's tough. But we had to do that for asset management. That's not really force design. That's just asset management. Anytime you give up, so cannon artillery is just swapped out for HIMARS. So I view that as kind of a clutch and gas issue. But anytime you give up structure, people get very nervous. But again, I've seen a Marine Corps from 172 to 202 within my 36 years today in the Marine Corps. So that's kind of gone up and gone down. So I think these things are tough to give up. But when you look at what we will have and are beginning to see, that's what we need for the future. Again, I don't want to fight last year's war.
Yeah, one thing that was very obvious when we were talking about the third offset and the changes that we were trying to make within the Department of Defense, you have to have three things to make it work. First, you have to have a vision, and the Commandant clearly has a vision, as he has articulated in a number of different ways why the Marine Corps has to change, what the battlefield of the future looks like to him, and why the Marine Corps of today has some work to do to get better. The second thing is you need top-down support. So in this case, both the Commandant and the Assistant Commandant are pushing everything. All Marines know that this is the Commandant's plan, and there is no misunderstanding. And the third thing is, short of a war, you need a compelling operational imperative. And as you said, we have the National Defense Strategy, which says China's the pacing threat. You've got to get ready for this. DOD has specifically asked the Marine Corps, look, we want you to contribute to deterrence in Indo-Pacific, and threatening large-scale amphibious assaults isn't going to contribute to that deterrence. So you have a compelling narrative. So mindful of these three things, are you worried at all that as soon as General Berger leaves, everything just goes away? Is this a sustainable change?
Sure, it is sustainable, and I'm not concerned that it goes away because it's fact-based and threat-informed. Will it change? It will absolutely change because the threat's going to change. It's the pacing threat, so it moves. So as the threat changes, we will continue to make our own changes. As I said, we've done that with V-22s. We've done that with artillery and HIMARS. We've done that with the size of an infantry battalion. So we'll continue to change, but the objective, the aim point is absolutely crystal clear. And that's not open for debate. That is the National Defense Strategy. I'm a poli-sci major, got to be average, but I'm a poli-sci major. I know what the Constitution says. I know how this works. Chain of command comes right down through the SecDef. And we have guidance that we're going to follow. That's what makes us so unique. When our Commandant says step off, we step off. We're not half-stepping, we step and move. I failed to, yes, it will absolutely endure because it's fact-based, threat-informed. I haven't touched, I know we're over, I'm sorry. But I know a lady in the front row, and she's probably not going to yell at me if I stay one extra minute. She might, but I hope not. I did not mention, because it's on rock-solid footing, marine aviation. We moved a second KC-130 squadron to the Pacific. It'll stand up in Hawaii. It's been stood up. CH-53K, our new helo, it's IOC, initial operating capability, 36,000 pounds of anything you want to move with 22% power left the last time they tested it. That is massive. We've got our MQ-9s going forward, F-35Bs coming online, our F-35C squadrons are there. So we've made significant moves in aviation, and we'll continue to manage our inventory, but the capabilities that they bring, pretty robust. So I want the aviators to get mad at me because it's almost, you don't say it because it's on rock solid footing across the board on aviation. So I should point that out, Mr. Secretary.
We are a little bit over time.
Yes, sir.
I want to shift gears just a little because this all depends on the individual Marine.
Absolutely.
And there's a lot of news that all of the services are struggling on the recruiting front. How is the Marine Corps doing on the recruiting front?
Sir, we made mission last year. We'll make mission this year. We made our retention mission in March. We normally don't make that till September, and we're just continuing to exceed the retention mission because people love being a Marine. We do it because we value recruiting. We value those who go to recruiting. We reward them. That's where most of our meritorious promotions go. And I've said it before, we don't do enlistment bonuses. We do re-enlistment bonuses. We're not going to pay you to become a Marine. You got to want to become a Marine. We haven't changed our core values. We haven't lowered our standards. We're not doing any of that. If you want to try out, if you want to attempt to become a Marine, doors open. And we're not going to come out there and beg you to do it. We're an all-recruited force. We have to keep the image of the Marine Corps as it was when I joined, which is you see a Marine, you want to live a challenge in life. You want to do things that are bigger than yourself. You want to contribute. You want to earn great training that you can use back in civilian life. So that's what we're doing, sir. But we've made mission last year. We'll make mission again. We're Marines. That's what we do. We got a mission. We'll go get it done. And the same is true with force design. The same is true with national defense strategy. And it's not false bravado. That's 247 years worth of this is what we do. It's who we are. It's who we attract. It's who we train. And, failure not an option.
Well, I think even though you only had 30 minutes to listen to the assistant commandant, I hope you got an impression of what a remarkable leader he is and Marine. And the Marine Corps is lucky to have him. The nation's lucky to have him. And let me just go on record to say, I hope he's the next commandant of the Marine Corps. I am going to take a lot of shit for that. He's going to brace me up as soon as we walk out that door. But thank you all, everyone. And Eric, thank you for everything you're doing.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, sir.